Hey, folks, welcome to a brand new season of Plan A Conversation, season 8. Can you believe it? We are finally in season 8, and I do believe 8 is the number of manifestation. So, curious to see what this year has in store for us, or this season has in store for us. A couple quick announcements before we get to today's interview. You all know from last week's podcast episode with Marissa Brunwell, the week before last, that I took part in this amazing scripted podcast called Venice. Please be sure to check that out. Look at the show notes so you can learn more about this incredible drama scripted series that the incredible genius that is Marissa created. A second announcement. I've been hearing a lot from you all about the meditations that we've been putting up through my second book, and you've been loving listening to those at night. And so I thought about actually creating an added on service. And so people are making different transitions in their lives in general, whether it's career wise, whether people are ending relationships, they're moving. A lot of fear, a lot of joy, and they want to have specialized meditations that they can use to rock with for themselves. So I have created a customized meditation for you all. And how it works is if you're interested in purchasing a meditation package for a friend or a loved one that's going through something or just needs a level of encouragement or empowerment, please check out the show notes for that as well. And these are customized 21-day meditations that is just designed specifically to address an issue or a supportive tool that you or someone is working on or working through. And you can again look to know that service through the show notes. So listen, the best thing about life, I think, is being introduced and being connected to some of the most amazing people in this world. And I say this every podcast episode. I never take it for granted that the universe has blessed me with the gift of either being a connector to people and also being connected to some very interesting and just stimulating folks who are shifting the narrative, who are changing the game and doing some very, very interesting things. And so the young man that you are seeing on the screen, Quentin Vennie, he and I got introduced actually through us both being featured in Black Enterprises 100 Modern Men of Distinction issue. And so I was reading about his story and the things that he was creating. I was like, I have to connect with him. And here we are a couple of years later in a podcast interview. So Quentin, welcome to the show. So good to see you, brother. How's everything?
I can't complain, family. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. It's amazing how how things turn around and move in the direction in which they are supposed to when they are supposed to. So this is a blessing, brother.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about that timing piece. In between that time, it was maybe 3 years ago or so, of receiving that honor. I have been seeing you on social media, just grinding it out and creating some really amazing wellness content. And beyond your books, beyond the Green Tea House company that we're going to talk about in a little bit, you have just been literally sharing so much of your own personal story with us. And so, before we get into all the things that you're doing and creating, how would you define your purpose and call in the world? What does that look like for you?
That's a beautiful question. How would I define my purpose and call? Um, I'm a firm believer that a shared experience can be a saved life, right?
Mm,
And I think that, our time on this earth is not our own remotely, right? It's not ours singularly. It's not ours to be hoarded, to be housed, and to be held. It's
mm,
ours to be shared, right? And so
mm,
I think with all of our vast experiences and the complexity that makes us human,
mm,
it is my goal, my purpose, and my responsibility, my ordained responsibility to take these experiences and share them universally, right, with individuals who may relate to it directly or may be able to find the blessing, a seed of a blessing in my
mm.
experiences that may not have the same ones as me, right? And so I think that my purpose and my calling shifts and changes, based on what God sees fit at the moment.
Yeah, I love that. Keyword that came out to mind are two keywords: ordained responsibility. What does that mean for you? And to help our listeners understand what that is.
Yeah. I think ordained responsibility to me is a responsibility that we house from a spiritual component, right? From a spiritual level.
Mm,
It's operating out of a space of spirit and energy and less out of our own cognitive beliefs. Because I think that, us as human beings, we are limited. We are limited to the amount of information we have. We are limited to our own imagination, our own creativity, right? But when we operate out of a space of pure energy, right? Universal energy and a spiritual calling, we get to transcend beyond our physical, presence on this earth, right? And
yeah.
we could start to then create spiritual and energetic connections and relation and changes.
Yeah, I love that. A big part of this podcast is helping people explore the complexities of all those things you just listed. And if I'm listening to this show or watching it on YouTube, I'm probably asking myself, have you always been in this space? How did you get to have this understanding of life? And you're laughing. I know there's a story that is that's there, but how did you get here?
You know what? It's an interesting thing. I ask myself that question all the time.
Hmm.
I am born and raised in West Baltimore, right? And for many people who only know Baltimore because of the Ravens or because of the Wire, um, you know, growing up in the 80s and 90s during the heroin epidemic in Baltimore City, we were plagued with not only poverty and dilapidation, but with a significant amount of crime and violence, right?
Yeah.
And so, for years, Baltimore and DC almost like battled for most dangerous city in the country.
Mm,
And growing up surrounded by these circumstances, you know um you have to hold on to something and gravitate towards something, and very, I was raised Catholic, converted over to Catholic, to Christianity, joined an
mm,
AME church. And then as I continued to really like grow and expound my levels of understanding from a spiritual perspective, from an energetic perspective, from a universal perspective, I understood that, from the Muslim faith to the Christian faith to the Catholic faith, we were all saying the same things, right? We were all
mm.
praying to the same higher power. We just had different modalities and means in which to get there,
Right.
and my father being, an addict for, most of my childhood. I had gone through a I'm sorry, I'd gone through a period where I had lost faith in God, where I
Mm,
cursed God, where I said, if God was real and God loved me and God cared about us, why then are we forced as Black people to be in these types of circumstances, in these situations, right? And so,
mm,
I had to, it was through my own learning and unlearning, that I had to, as the Bible says, leave the bricks behind and follow me, right? I had to find
mhm,
my own connection to what God was, who God was, and what God meant to me. And from that
mm,
point, going through these, this period of, prescription drug addiction, I consider myself to be the accidental addict, right? Like
mm,
I intentionally chose practices and things to prevent me from becoming addicted to any substances, whether drugs or alcohol. And as a result, going through the proper channels of seeking medical advice and going to the doctor and taking prescriptions, like I ended up becoming addicted to the same medication that was told would help remedy the symptoms of my anxiety disorders. And so
wow.
losing faith in the medical system, losing faith in a lot of what we've been taught, to be true in America, to be true as Black people, to be true as a culture, to be true
Mm,
as a society, and then having to reshape that way of thinking because all of these things that that I was taught and was told never worked it worked in my favor. They worked against
mm,
me,
mhm,
and so I had to then, like essentially retrain myself to believe in something greater than me and allow
mm,
that belief to guide my movements. And
mm,
from that point, being able to survive two failed suicide attempts, to be able to survive, an accidental drug overdose, to be able to survive some of the things that I was engulfed and engaged in the streets of here in Baltimore City. I've struggled with survivor's guilt, but
mhm,
the other side of that is, not taking for granted the fact that I am here, right? And being
mm,
able to be a beacon of hope and some level of motivation and inspiration for somebody else somewhere in this world, that can to help them understand that where they are today is not always where they will be, right? And to be able to stand firm in that belief and to be the personification of what that looks like, has I think has really pushed me into this spiritual realm of understanding.
To the spiritual realm of understanding. Do you believe then that everything that we go through there's a purpose behind it, there's a reason behind it, or are some things coincidental?
I don't believe in coincidences at all. I
Mm,
don't believe in coincidences and I don't believe in luck. I believe that
mhm,
everything is divine, right? I believe that the decisions that we make, whether good or bad, are going to ultimately lead us down a specific path. I do believe that we have more control than we give ourselves credit for. And
mhm,
because of that, it's often the reason why we often feel that we've moved so far away from where we're supposed to be, or where we
mhm,
want to be, I should say, right? But where we want to be and where we should be often aren't the same. And it's when we
mhm,
come to this level of understanding that everything that happens, that we believe happens to us, is happening for us. And it is then our responsibility to take that information, to dial it down and figure out what it means to us.
mhm.
Only then can we move past those moments of coincidence or bad luck, so to speak.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And how then do we take responsibility for the things that happen to us and being able to utilize those for the betterment of our lives or as teachable moments, as lessons learned? How do we navigate that? Because I know so many people who feel that things are happening to them rather than things are happening for them, things are happening, through them to have these moments of a higher learning to push your life forward. Like how do you reconcile that for yourself personally?
I think for me, it's been a process of trusting the journey, right? And
Mm,
understanding that we're not going to always get it when we want to get it, right?
right.
Even thinking about it, like for me, for instance, I was 7 years old. I was sexually molested by a neighbor's son.
Mhm,
And for a long time, I was embarrassed by that. I didn't
mhm,
want to speak about it. I was ashamed. I thought that something, like it was my fault. And like, the culture that I've grown up in made me feel like, because that happened, that I was less than human and, all of these things.
right.
And even acknowledging it, I've had to come to the understanding that I have to accept the apology that I'll never receive, right?
Wow.
And so it is in that acceptance that
Huh.
I'm able to take whatever it was that I needed from as a 7 year old all the way up to 30 years later, right? In
Mhm,
order to help benefit my life. I no longer look at that as something that was, yes, it was done to me, but it was also done for me in the way that it helped me gain a level of confidence in myself and
mm,
understanding, that my past led me to my present and it's going to
yeah.
lead me to my future. And so I can allow it to be the thing that destroys me
Mm,
and causes me to reduce myself, or I can be
mhm,
the one that causes that allows it to be something that is empowering to me. Now I can have
mhm,
the conversation and dialogue with other people that have gone through a similar experience, right? And help them heal, right? And so it's like, DMX says something at the end of the prayer on his first album. And he says, if it takes for me to suffer, for my brother to see the light, give me pain till I die. But please,
mm.
Lord, treat him right.
Wow. Wow. Talk about grace, literally, an act of unearned goodness and kindness that's available to all of us. And one thing that you just said about the apology maybe not ever being received, there are so many people who are being held back from their life progressing, being held back from potential opportunities, manifestations, relationships, or just, the call that they feel is on their life and they feel stunted and stagnated by that. What do you say to people who are struggling with not being able to receive the apology that they should have had from 20, 30 years ago that they're still holding on to today?
I think the reality, right, is, you know, and it's the understanding that as long as we hold on to that toxicity, there's like a saying, I can't really remember it is almost like swallowing poison and expecting someone else to get sick and die.
Yeah. Hmm.
Right? It's like as long as we continue to hold on to that toxicity, clearly the person that whoever it was that did the thing, right? The reality of you receiving an apology is slim to none, because a
Mm,
lot of people unfortunately don't do the self work necessary to move beyond this place of ego and to step into the place of humanity, right? It takes a
mm,
real person to be able to acknowledge the significance and level of trauma that someone has caused you, right? So the likelihood of you
mhm,
getting that is slim to none, right? So
mhm,
why continue to allow your life to be a result of what happened versus something that's out of your control, mind you,
mm,
that
mhm,
happened to you, versus regaining that level of control? Because as long as you
mm.
expect something greater from them, right, what you are getting is something lesser than from yourself.
That's right. That's right. Oh my gosh, I love that. Lesser than from yourself. And being somebody who clearly have been doing the work and continue to do the work, at what point in your life did you know that the internal work that you were doing after going through and still going through different things in your life, how did you know that it was working for you?
I think for me, I realized that it was working for me when I recognized that my happiness and my joy wasn't predicated on someone else's ability to provide it for me.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? Like when I
Yeah.
really got that, when I could sit in
Mhm.
silence with myself and
Mhm.
proclaim that in this moment I am happy and I am filled with joy and I don't
Mm.
need any external suggestions, recommendations, or anybody outside of myself to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
I recognized at that point that all of this discomfort, all of this pain, all of this work was finally working for me.
Ah, that's it. Was finally working for me. And Quentin, a lot of some of these things that we've been talking about is cataloged wonderfully well and written incredibly, I would say, beautifully in your book, Strong in the Broken Places. What led you to want to create this book, and what was your intention for putting that work together?
Interestingly, and first of all, I appreciate, the love and
Hmm.
support on the book. That was from birth to 35,
Right.
34, right? Like that was my
Hmm.
life's work. That was my life put in pages.
Hmm.
So for anyone who has picked that up and has read it, has digested it, I owe a debt of gratitude and appreciation. Um, the motivation behind that book was the fact that prior to wanting to put out a book, I tend to be very private. I'm a one would not believe that, right? Because I share so much now, but like,
Yeah.
if I go to a speaking engagement, like I give the talk, I shake hands, I kiss babies, I give hugs, and you won't see me again.
Yeah.
I'm that guy. You won't see me
Hmm.
at the after party.
Hmm.
I'm not that guy. And so, the motivation behind it was really understanding that there was an entire community of people who were experiencing the similar things that I was experiencing, who needed the answers that I had worked desperately to find, right?
Wow.
And
Hmm.
that I discovered that through this process of writing. I was writing for MindBodyGreen. I was writing for Huffington Post. I was writing for Thrive Global. I was writing for all of these different platforms, sharing the experiences of a life that I once tried to take. Right?
Hmm.
It was through that building of community and that sharing of my humanness and other people feeling compelled and inspired to share their humanness with me. I
Hmm.
recognize that in my experience lies value,
Hmm.
not just my life on this earth, but the things that I've gone through in this life serve as bites of intellectual and social and emotional food for
Mm.
people that are starving for that. you know
Right.
my book was the book that I was looking for when I was starting my healing journey. Everything that I've done up to this point, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, right? But what all I'm doing for others is creating what it was that I knew I needed, and I wasn't able to find it, right? And so
Mhm,
I created it myself. I created
mhm,
my own journey of healing. I created my own philosophies and thought processes about anxiety and about mental health and about depression that helped me get through these moments, right? And so so other people don't have to go through the exact same journey of discovery and, and trial and error, because everybody doesn't get to the other side. I have to be honest.
That's
So many
real.
people try, so many people struggle, so many people are going to push forward every day, but not everybody's going to get to that point of enlightenment.
Mm.
If I can help make that path a little bit easier, right? If I can just add one tidbit of information, or provide one moment, one quote of inspiration, or one spark of motivation, or one day of 1 hour where a person believes in themselves again, right? Then my time on this earth is valuable.
Yeah, yeah. What has surprised you the most about the response to your book?
Um, Honestly, the thing that surprised me the most is the emotional connection to this book that I've had with non people of color.
Really?
Yeah. I wrote
Ah,
this I wrote this book from the perspective of a young black boy from West Baltimore. And I've
okay.
I've been fortunate to travel all across this country. I've traveled to Belize, and I've shared this book and the experiences in it. And at practically every event, there's been like an emotional awakening from non-people of color. I expect people of color to resonate, right? I'm telling our
Right,
story.
right.
I am our child, right? Like I am
Yeah.
the child of our culture, of our
Mm.
ancestors, right? We are
Mhm,
we are kin, we are in relation, right? I expect that level of understanding. I
mm.
didn't expect it from those who didn't have to go through it. And I think that's been
Wow.
a um, really beautiful experience.
Yeah, what does that then tell you about the message behind, the universality and behind the message of your work?
For me, it reminds me that um, if you strip away our gender, if you strip away our skin color, if you strip away our religions, if you strip away all of the things that have been created to separate us, to segregate us, um, the only commonality that matters is our humanity. And when we are able to strip away all of these things that have created biases, that have created prejudices, that have created fears, right? Um, it gives us the unique opportunity to see the human being that exists behind these categories. And that is the connection of spirit.
Wow. Yeah, that is the connection of spirit. And what do you think is literally behind maybe the impetus or the barrier that we create or has been created that keeps us away from having that connection, being able to see the relatability in someone else's story, being able to see the connection between, what someone in Honduras is going through versus, Biloxi, Mississippi? Like, what is that missing link?
I think we've for as long as we have been on, and I'm a person that believes in Jesus Christ. I don't believe that we came from dinosaurs and all of that, right? Um, I don't crap on anybody else for their beliefs. It's just not my own. I believe, since we've been here, we've been segregated. There is a large part of the population, whether in America or in another country, that thrives off of power and control, and those beliefs were brought to America. Those beliefs exist in other parts of the country, and I think
Right.
it is the as we continue to evolve as human beings, there are some belief systems that don't change. They don't evolve,
Right.
right? They continue to grow. They continue to be perpetuated, and I don't think that enough people on either side have taken the responsibility. Not of both sides, but of one side in particular, the side
Mm.
of dominance, the side of supremacy, have actually taken the full enough responsibility and accountability to create a more equitable world.
Hmm. And I think I hear a lot from other people who say, I feel like a lot of people of color, Black people, are putting this narrative of responsibility on me into something that I did not create. It was nothing that I did. I inherited all of these different things. So is the weight of the burden of that responsibility on me? Like, I'm your friend. I want to support you. Like, what do you say to people who really don't understand this idea of responsibility and what what it entails today?
I think, when we talk about it from the perspective of just being Americans, right? And understanding that racism is real, understanding that oppression is real, understanding that, systemic racism is real, understanding that supremacy is real, understanding that dominant culture is real. The responsibility lies on everyone who, um, I'll say this, racism is not a choice. It is a system. And as long as you are not actively moving against it, you are passively moving toward it.
Wow.
And so, be that as it may, right? Um, unless you accept the fact that you have benefited from this system and the way that it has been constructed, and choose to make a conscious effort to reverse that system, then you will continually to and perpetually benefit from that system. But your benefiting from it also means that someone who you've deemed to be your friend suffers. So what does friendship mean in that capacity? Are you willing to compromise the privileges of your children, right,
Yeah.
for the equality of your friend?
Wow. That's the question. That's the question.
Everything else is performative allyship.
There we go. There we go. I believe that wholeheartedly, and it's so interesting, even from the weight of responsibility that a lot of people feel directed at the dominant culture, and then also I'm thinking about the lower caste, and from the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, the spiritual residual effect of racism has a lot of Black people in particular wondering and or feeling, where is God? We're taught in church, our spiritual belief system, and for the longest period of time, our faith, regardless if you are Christian or not, historically, it is something that's just been translated to us from century to century to century. And yet, I hear current day friends and associates, and even some former seminarian friends of mine, constantly say, you're still praying to a God that has kept us enslaved and that allows us to still not have equity in various capacities in our life. And people often ask, where is God in all of this? And how does God allow all this to happen? What would you say, or what is your feeling on that?
I think that until we see how this earth ends, we can't predict what it will look like,
Hmm.
right? In the Bible, it says the meek shall inherit the earth, the
Hmm.
last shall be first, and the first shall be last, right? And
Hmm.
so, until we know what the end of the book looks like, and it does for me, it doesn't stop in Revelations, like that.
Ah.
That's the stopping of the written word, right? Like that's not the stopping of reality, right? So until we see what the end looks like,
Yeah.
right? Then our faith has to stand firm, right? Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It is the evidence of things not yet seen, right? So
Hmm.
when we've lost the idea of what we haven't been able to grasp yet, what we haven't been able to see manifest yet, then we've lost faith, right? But it's
Yeah.
like 150 years ago, we didn't see a Jay-Z and Beyonce and an Oprah Winfrey.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's
So
right.
like there's been progress. It may not be what we want it to be, and it may not be for everybody, but progress is being made. And as long as we stay firm and steadfast in our beliefs and the things that we can contribute ourselves, right? Not just to ourselves, but for us as a collective,
That's
right? And we
right.
stand firm on that, we can continue to push forward and build. Black Wall Street was built. Yes, it was destroyed, right? But it was built. Who's to say we can't build it again?
Yeah, what I heard you say and the download I got from that is spirit is stronger than the written word. And I think
100%.
so many people are fixated on the finite reality of what it is that they can see rather than the experience of what they potentially can believe, the world to become.
Yeah,
Um,
and just to expound, right? Like from my personal experience, I grew up West Baltimore, poor. Father was a heroin addict, raised by a single mother. Went to schools dominated by people who didn't look like me. Experienced racism on every level, you know. And yet, I bought a house, my first home. I bought a house last year in a neighborhood in Baltimore City that was once illegal for Black people to live in, right? The things that I am able to do in my life are things that society and the history books and my own limited imagination would have never depicted for myself, right? No one can tell me God isn't real. And no one can tell me that God doesn't live and reside within each and every one of us if we allow it to.
if we allow it to. And I think that's the key word in knowing that we have the power to. How do we tap into that power to connect to, source, to connect to God, but also to connect into our deeper selves, to be open to our purpose and be open to the dreams that I personally feel that God has in store for each of us?
I mean, I think for me it's really finding these moments of stillness, right? Like
Mm.
we've been conditioned to believe that in order for us to be successful, we have to work ourselves tirelessly. You know what I mean? We gotta like wake up at 5 in the morning, drink 9 cups of coffee, go to work, work
Uh,
overtime, do double overtime, have a part-time gig, a hustle on the side, Instagram, when we can, tweet when we can, all of these things without
yep.
finding these moments of silence and stillness just to be, right? Like it gives us a chance to reset, right? And allow our brains, our imagination, our cognitive function to start brewing, and then the other side of it is not limiting ourselves, by what we see, or our own beliefs.
Good
We are
point.
limited by our own beliefs sometimes
Hmm.
because in society we're told more of the things that we can't do and less of the things that we can, and so many of us believe it. I've always lived with I grew up poor, right? And so for me it was always like, I'm going to go and have this conversation with this person, with this CEO who knows nothing about me. Why? Because the worst thing that happens is I stay where I am.
Mm.
My worst case scenario is always that I just stay where I am.
Right.
Like if I started a job and I made $25,000 a year and I got up to the point where I made 65, right? Why am I not going to push for that 125? Worst case scenario is I stay at 65. I'm not afraid to go back to 30 because I already know that I've done what it takes to get to 65. So if every level of our accomplishment is met with the thought that we don't have anything to lose except staying where we are, why are we so afraid?
That's right. Why are we so afraid? And I think you hit the nail right on the head, especially about that space of stillness. Not only does it allow you to be able to move through life and to expand and to also be um, uh, grateful for where you are, but it allows you to create, I think, as well. And so, how did Greenhouse Tea Company come about? Did that come about from a place of stillness as well? Like, how did that originate?
I'm gonna tell you a funny story, and it's something that it trips me out, right? Like, so I'm good friends with a yoga teacher. Her name is Tara Stiles. She started a style of yoga called Strala, and Tara was the woman I followed on YouTube, and social media during the early stages of me getting into yoga. Didn't want to get into yoga because I thought yoga was weird. I thought it was like a weird sex cult that white people did, and I didn't want anything to do with it, right? And so she made it accessible for me. Fast forward a few years, after getting into it, I actually befriended her. So her and I, we're really good friends. I actually just FaceTimed with her yesterday, just as a human, mental health check. Um, and one time I did one of her teacher trainings, And it was myself and another friend, Michelle, and we were just sitting down having a conversation. And Tara used to drink, you know, countless amounts of coffee. And I used to be like, listen, Tara, like, I really want you to stop drinking so much coffee. It's actually not that good. And, in excess, one of the things that I've gotten into is drinking tea. I'm going to one day start my own tea company. Um, I, they both told me this story, this exact story in two separate conversations, right? I don't remember either of them. I don't remember, I don't remember it ever happening, right? I have no idea that it ever happened. I have no idea that I ever had a conversation with anybody about starting a tea company. That is the last thing that my limited creative brain would have concocted would be my reality. My son was diagnosed with ADHD when he was 7. Because of my experiences in becoming addicted and dependent on medication, I wanted to find a way to make sure that he didn't face the same challenges and struggles. And so I elected to manage his ADHD naturally and holistically. So I shifted his diet. He became gluten free, ended up going vegan, meditation, yoga, very structured schedule, the whole thing, basketball, like everything. At a neurologist appointment about 2.5 years ago, we were told that he was struggling with school, having really difficult time focusing. He never really had the hyperactive part of ADHD. He just had issues focusing. And the neurologist also was like, "Listen, medication is the last ditched effort. Before we go that route, to help him with his focus, have him drink 2 ounces of green tea 30 minutes prior to any big test or any big assignment." Right? In theory, the limited amount of caffeine that's offered in the 2 ounces, plus the limited amount of caffeine that's offered in green tea, should be able to help him focus the same way a prescription to Adderall would, without the risk of becoming dependent or addicted and without the side effects. The challenge was he didn't like green tea. Green tea is naturally bitter, it's naturally astringent, right? The quality of tea that we get here in retail stores and most big box retailers, you're not going to get full leaf, great quality tea. You're gonna, it's commercialism, right? You're gonna get what people can are willing to give you. So in order to make that work, I want, and I agree with him. I was like, this green tea, this tea that I'm tasting tastes like trash. Like I would have to like sweeten it with like half a thing of honey, right? And it's like
Right.
then that defeats the purpose because now we're all hyped up on sugar, and and then we have the sugar crash 2 hours later, right? And so I was like, let me research this because it all can't be this bad. And so my wife and I, we went through extensive research. We tried a multitude of different types of teas, different types of green teas. We played around with different ingredients and was like, let's just make our own. Let's create something that's palatable for him, that we like, that we don't need to pump with a lot of honey and sugar and all of these other things, and let's see what we do, right? And that's what we did, and we created our Awaken blend, which is green tea, lemon verbena, lemongrass, and lavender. And on the website, it is our number one best selling tea. And for the first year in my son's life, he's 12 now. He just finished um, his first year in middle school. He made the honor roll. And I'm not going to say that green tea was, like you drink awakened green tea and your kid's going to make the honor roll. But for us, I don't know if it was the fact that, the theory that his neurologist said worked, or if it's the practice and the process, right? Of blending the tea, of brewing it, of sweetening it, like it's a practice, right? It is an experience. You're not just it doesn't Our teas don't come in a bag. You can't just throw some hot boiling water in it and then go on
Right.
about your day as you would, if you
Right.
just visited a Starbucks and was looking for like mint tea. You have to steep it at a certain temperature for a certain period of time. We use full leaf, whole leaf ingredient, full leaf, loose leaf ingredient, so you can actually see the tea leaves unfurl as they continue to brew and steep. And it becomes a process, right? It becomes a meditation all in its own, and that's helped him. And so from that point, we then started to create other blends, right? Because of my anxiety, I've struggled with insomnia, so we created a blend to help me sleep at night. We created a blend to help mitigate my seasonal allergies. We created a blend to help mitigate the symptoms of challenge inflamed digestion and digestive system. And we tried all of these teas, for the first year and a half, just drinking them ourselves at home, for my wife, myself, and my family. And and then we kind of came to this point when I left my executive job. um, I started doing coaching, and started doing consulting, race equity consulting, and it was really stressful. I was like, listen, I'm really enjoying creating these tea blends. Why don't we just start a business? Why don't we make these things accessible to everybody else, right? If they work for us, again, it goes back to my initial point, right? A lived experience can be a shared experience can be a saved life. Why are we going to find these things that have worked for us and our family and just hoard them? Let's make them available to everyone else, because everybody struggles, right? Everybody goes through moments of dis-ease, right? If we found something that works, right, and we want to create a more equitable space, we believe that being healthy should not be a privilege. It's a human
That's
right,
right.
right? And so, like, let's make something accessible for everyone, no matter where you are, no matter what you look like, no matter what you do, you have the right to be well.
Talk about looking at your life and using your life as purpose. So many people, and even like clients that I talk to all the time, say, I have no inspiration. There's nothing that is happening in my life that can benefit me. And they've overcome something, and they overcome this and that. That is literally a service and is literally able to help the human condition at the same exact time. That's exactly what you all did.
It's what I've built my life off of the past 10,
Yeah.
past 8 years. Like, ever since I went through my struggle and I started to share my human experience,
Hmm.
I recognized that there were so many other people that were going through the same thing. I've always been a person that gives, right? Like, I'll give my
Yeah.
last dollar. I'll give the shirt off my back. I remember I went to Whole Foods one time and I bought some pizza and saw a homeless guy, sleeping on the steps, like he was eating something, but you could tell he was hungry. I just gave him the pizza, right? Like, I've always been
Mhm.
like that guy. Like, I can go back and get it again. Even if I'm hungry tonight,
Right.
I know I can eat tomorrow. You don't have that option, right? And so for
Right.
me, I've always been a person of service. And
Yeah.
I feel like we as human beings, if we dedicated our lives to being of service to others, right, it would show us that we are actually then being of service to ourselves. We're being
That's
of
right.
service to the greater good. It's like the idea of being grateful or gratitude. If you focus on the things you don't have, you're going to get more of the things you don't have. But if you focus on the things that you're grateful for, then you will be blessed with more things to be grateful for. Right. And so it's like, how do we choose to look at that for ourselves, for our lives? Do we choose to say, yeah, I went through this, yeah, I went through that, but there's no value in that. And instead of going through that, I wish I was able to do this. Instead of surviving, poverty, I wish I was able to buy a Bentley. Instead of surviving sexual abuse, I wish I was able to be a CEO of a company. Like, instead of looking at this as a pathway to something greater, right, and allowing your purpose and passion to shift and to change as your life continues to grow, right, and be able to manifest these things, maybe you can buy that Bentley and maybe you can be that CEO. But instead of being that for something that someone else owns, maybe being that for something that you own, something that you've created, something that you've manifested for yourself that benefits a collective, right? And so I think we have to get out of this position in this space of ego and what life should look like, as opposed to looking like, focusing on what life could look like if we just allow ourselves that moment and that space to be still enough to come back to self.
Yeah, to come back to self. How has this way of living, this way of being, this awakening, and this purpose-led life, how's it strengthening your relationship as a father and as a husband to your wife?
I think when I got married, right, I was still moving from a space of ego. I was like, yeah, I healed myself from, from addiction. I've got myself off my pills. I managed my anxiety. Like I wrote a book. Like I did all of these things that no one told me that I could do. That everyone told me I was crazy for doing. Um, and it was that ego that almost drove my wife to leave. It was that
Wow.
ego that created a really toxic relationship between me and my kids. You know,
Mm,
and it was the same ego that helped me survive and live, in the streets, coming up, in
yeah.
Baltimore. But it was the recognition that I had brought myself as far as I could go alone.
Mm,
I
that's
couldn't
right.
continue to grow singularly. I needed a
Mm,
community. I needed other
mm,
people, right? I needed to first let my ego go, right? And acknowledge that there was still more room to grow. I still
mhm.
had more growing to do. I'm a firm believer that you can't teach a person anything if they already believe they know everything, right? And the
Wow.
smartest
That's right.
people know that they know nothing at all. Erica Badu, you know, um, so so for me it was not being afraid to accept the fact that I didn't know, to accept the fact that I had more growing to do, and then reach out to individuals to get help. And so I think therapy has been one of the greatest decisions that I ever made for myself, was choosing to go to therapy, right? Choosing to be open enough and honest enough, with myself and with someone else, without the fear of being ridiculed or judged or criticized, but purely for the purpose of becoming the best version of myself for my family.
Yeah. How does the ego part? I loved your explanation and the nuance and complexities of that story. How does one strip away or unlearn that ego part when it was, like you're saying, a survival tactic that you needed for so many years of your life? Like how do we get there to the point where I don't need any longer? I need to shift my mindset and move towards something different.
I think it's the again, I firmly believe it is taking those moments of silence and stillness. We get so caught up as human beings, right? And like, yeah, we did this thing and now we got to go on to the next, right? On to the next, on to the next, on to the next. That we don't give ourselves the opportunity to reflect on how far we've come.
Mm,
If you live,
that's me.
if you've grown, like you have to, sometimes we have to pat ourselves on the back and say, God damn it, brother, you made it.
That's right.
That where you are today is not where you were 10 years ago. And
Mhm,
so the same things that you needed, right? Like Jay-Z says all the time, he says, the thing that I needed to make a million is not the same thing it's going to take for me to make a billion.
mhm.
And so when we let go of, and I love music, so I always have like these
Yeah,
music quotes and
I'm loving
analogies. Uh,
yeah.
when we are able to reflect on how far we've come, we are only then able to see that what we needed at that moment may not be the same thing that we need in this one. And in that process, ego strips away. We have to allow that process. So many people call it meditation. I call it awakening. I call it, meditation is nothing more than awareness. It's awareness of myself in any given moment. I have to remember, like, I live in a pretty prominent neighborhood in Baltimore City, tucked away. People jog in my neighborhood with the dogs. You see people outside at 9:30 walking around with their, German shepherds, right, with a little flashlight. It's not the same in my neighborhood that I grew up in.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we got grass growing out here. We have, I have a garden in my backyard. Where I grew up, we didn't have grass in the front or the back. You know, so the things that I needed to survive then aren't the things that I need to thrive now. I'm in a different place. I'm not in a space of survival anymore. I've survived. God forbid
Did
anything
that.
happened to me
Mhm.
today or tomorrow. I've lived a full life. I don't need to survive. Now, Drake says, everybody lives, but not everybody. What do you say? Everybody dies, but not everybody lives.
Everybody lives. Yeah.
I'm living now. Now it's like, okay, I've gone through surviving. Now I'm in the moment of thriving so that the rest of my life can be lived to its fullest capacity and potential. So the same tools and the quick wit and the the street smarts and the sleeping with one eye open that I needed to survive back then, I don't need that anymore. Instead of sleeping with one eye open, I need to sleep with both eyes closed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I need my 8 hours so that I can get up in the morning and go do my thing. I'm not in that place anymore.
Quentin, dude, that is a message that so many people need to hear. I'm telling you, this is literally going to be the soundbite of the podcast. Because last question: how do you dream for something that you have yet to experience in life? How does one do that?
Um, I think for me, uh, I have to first visualize it. Um, I have to first believe that what it is that I want is attainable. It's the belief that what you want is attainable. Um, Once I believe that it is attainable, that I am worthy of it, not that I deserve it, but that I am worthy of it, then I have to visualize what it feels like to have it. I have to embody that feeling fully and completely. You know, I have to sit back on my couch and visualize that I'm not looking at some trees and some grass. I'm on my 30th floor balcony overlooking the Pacific Ocean, right? That this fan that's blowing is not actually the wind that's blowing from my fan is not my fan. It is the breeze coming from the Pacific
Mm,
Ocean,
mm-hmm.
right? I have to embody that. What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What does it look like? Who else is involved? Who's next to me, right? Then I put it on a vision board. I'm a big vision board guy.
Me too.
Um,
Yeah.
I have my vision board on Pinterest. I use it sometimes as my computer screen, right? Like so that I'm always looking at it. And it goes back to the start, right? You ever bought a new car? Like let's say you just bought a green Toyota Camry. And before you bought it, it was like, yo, this is dope. Nobody has this car. As soon as you pull off the lot, you see 9 green Toyota Camrys that look just like yours, right? On the way home.
Right.
It's the same way. It's the same way, right? Because now you have something to focus on. If you leave out of your house, anybody listening right now, leave out of your house and say, you know what, I'm going to focus on something red, or I'm going to focus on something yellow, or I'm going to focus on something purple. And all day long, when you leave out of your house, I'm going to focus on finding something pink, purple, green, whatever that color is. I guarantee you, you're going to see it. Walk the same path that you walk every day. Go the same route that you go every day. I guarantee you, you're going
Preach.
to see it,
Yeah.
right? And so this is the way the universe works and our benefit. This is how manifestation works. We have to believe it, we have to see it, we have to experience it, and then we got to put in the work to get it.
That
And when we put in that work, right, it might not look like I got to wake up every day and send 25 emails and respond to 25 comments on Instagram and post 3 things today and 9 things tomorrow. It might not look like that. That's not reality, right? That's not reality. You might wake up tomorrow 3 hours late. Now you done lost 3 hours of your day. So where's those 3 posts? Right? But every day it's being intentional. If you can do one thing to move in the direction of what it is that you've prayed for, what it is that you visualize, what it is that you believe that you are worthy of receiving, one thing every day, put one foot in front of the other. It may not look the same. I guarantee you'll get it.
Listen, Quentin, I have started to rock back and forth, and whenever that happens, I'm moved. Like I'm literally just instinctively and spiritually just moved. Brother, listen, this cannot be the only conversation. We have to come back for a part two.
Let's do it.
People who are interested in buying your book, being able to connect to your services, and also, like myself, I'm going to go ahead after we're done here and go to Greenhouse Tea Company's website to purchase some tea. Where can we do all that?
Yeah, you can find me on QuentinVennie.com, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all Quentin Vennie. It's QuentinVinnie, V as in Victor, ENNIE. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And Greenhouse Tea Company is greenhouseteas.com and Greenhouse Teas on Instagram as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this time, Quentin. I literally was trying to figure out who was going to be the person to kick off season 8. And the thing of what you were just talking about, just sitting and being still. And literally, as I was scrolling through Instagram, I was like, Quentin, that's who it is. That's who it is. So I want to thank you for this time. And listen, folks, of course, I'll have all of Quentin's information at the base of this podcast. You can learn more about me by visiting clayswilliams.com. And I'm on all your favorite social media by the handle of @PlanA with Clay. That's @PlanA with Clay. Remember, folks, Clay's with a K. Thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing you in our very next episode of Plan A Conversations. Peace.